Hello, everybody, and welcome to another hair-raising, fun-filled episode of Radiorama, where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios and other forms of electronic devices from the 1920s through about the 1960s. And today we have a 1941 Crosley, of course I've already forgotten the model, O2CP. 41, that probably means it was actually sold in 1940. It's got a nice big dial. It has a built-in fold-out record player. And this was donated about a week ago. And according to the person that donated it, it had belonged to, I think, if I'm getting the story right, his boss. And it had been in his family for a long time. And they, I believe, lived above the Oakland Paramount Theater around Lake Merritt. And so I guess he handed down memories of the family listening to records and having some dance parties during World War One. Not World War One, Jesus. World War Two. I just got up. I'm tired. It is a, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's a 10-tube set. It looks like we have push-pull audio. I don't usually see these kind of output tubes that often. 6AC5. There's a rectifier. I've worked on this model before, and it has loathsome, crumbly, rubber-coated wiring that all needs to be replaced. Someone has been in here. It's got a newer power cord, a newer antenna wire. I did briefly power it up, and it does kind of work. Let's see, repair for customer. Looks like it was repaired in 1945. I have the, I forget what I did with it. I have the original paperwork for it. Here is a more modern parts list, but then we have the instructions for both the record player and the radio. Usually people lose that stuff. Now, Crosley was kind of a cheaper brand. Cheaper meaning they seemed to cheap out on a lot of the components, and the construction quality is just so-so. There is a note, a receipt that came with it that apparently these two knobs were replaced sometime in the 90s, and I know why, because these guys usually deform. So the last one I worked on was grossly deformed. This plastic has this tendency to shrink and get brittle, and these buttons pop off if you just look at them, so I need to probably glue that one. Here's another thing that's really important when it comes to working on something like this. A way that they came up for making exotic looking veneers was they used a photo transfer process. This stuff here, it's a printed photo of fake wood here and along the bottom. So some people that aren't familiar with that, if they get something like that and they're like, oh, I can like sand it down, don't do it. Because once you take this off, it's gone. Completely gone. Luckily that it's in pretty good shape. We got a little nicks, scratches here. It looks like maybe it was kept out of the sun a decent amount. We've got a little bit of discoloration up here. That's normal. Some ring spots where people probably set coffee mugs or whatever. So I don't have enough wire. I've run out of hookup wire to make all of that rubber wire go away. So I need to go to the museum. In fact, I'm going to do something I haven't done in 2.5 years. I'm going to go to this local diner called Ollie's. It's been around since the 20s, and because I'm kind of OCD, I have not gone to any restaurants that are inside since the pandemic started. And it seems, I mean, I'm probably going to eat my own words, but somehow it seems like we're not really getting the surge that everyone said we were going to get. And so while the numbers are low right now, because it seems like every time that we think it's over, it gets bad again. I'm gonna go to that restaurant. And the reason I'm gonna do it is because well, I've been going there forever. And secondly, the people that owned it, believe it or not, were about to retire, and they sold off all their retirement property to keep their employees employed during the first year of the pandemic. So that speaks volumes of the integrity. So I feel like I need to patronize them, kind of show some little appreciation, little love. So that's going to be exciting. I've been eating ham and cheese sandwiches for 2.5 years. It's getting really old. So I'm going to go have some waffles and some bacon and eggs. I'm going to stop at the museum and get some wire too. Okay, I got a variety of wire that I can use. I found this stuff. Cloth covered wire. Berkshire Husky cable. I was like, this looks kind of new. And I looked it up. Berkshire Electric Cable Company. Leeds, Massachusetts. Yes, they are still in business. That's pretty great. This is something you'll probably see in a future episode. It is a nightmarish, gigantic Philips console. And this is going to be the direct opposite of the Crosley. This is just a god-awful mess versus the Crosley, which will probably have like exactly 10 parts inside. While I was here, I know I don't have any 6AC5 tubes. I don't know what the condition of those that are in the set are. So if one of them's weak or bad, at least I have a backup. And I'm running low on some values of electrolytics. So I got a fistful of various values. Being from the late 30s, early 40s, the electrolytic capacitors are probably going to be something weird like 16, 20 microfarads or something. But who knows? We'll see. Anyway, it's time to get back on the road. And I tell you what, having waffles for the first time in a long time, that was great. Highly recommend it. If you're ever in my neck of the woods, go to Ollie's Waffle Shop. All right, I have returned from the museum, and I'm going to take the chassis out and give her a whirl. Beautiful day out there. It's like it's nice and sunny and warm, and I could either go to the beach, go sit at a local brewery and have a beer, go on a hike, or spend the whole day working on an old radio. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's work on the radio. What a great use of time. Well, that chassis came out pretty easily, and I gotta say, once I've gotten it out of here, it's super clean. I mean, it's barely even dusty. The original paint looks brand new. Let's take first of all, it doesn't weigh anything. You can tell it's a Crosley. There's Crosley. Like I said, they were kind of a low-cost manufacturer. Looks like there's been some work done on it. It's not very good work either. It's got this jerry-rig nonsense here. I'm not sure why you would think that's a great idea. I mean, they're probably... If they're chassis ground, why in the hell wouldn't you just like attach one lead to the ground, then cinch your leads up? That's really sloppy work. I'm going to replace both those anyway. Looks like we got a couple of new caps coming off of whatever that tube happens to be. One of the IF-RF tubes. The rest of this is all original. We have a bunch of paper caps, but not many. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I've seen more paper caps in a tabletop radio. So there ain't a whole lot going on here. Again, the biggest problem is going to be all this god-awful wire. Like this is a set switch to turn it off and on. I wouldn't feel comfortable operating this thing with that wire in there. I mean, I'm sure as soon as I look at it, yeah, it's crumbly. That'd be a great way to absolutely destroy the power transformer. I need to maybe pull up the schematic and figure out what value these giant dog bone resistors are. They look like They've gotten pretty damn hot. I have no way of knowing what their value is because the way that you read these dog bone resistors, BED, so body, end, and dot. Since the body color is completely disintegrated, I don't know what they're supposed to be. So I'll pull up the schematic and trace where these guys go. If it weren't for the wire, this would have been a super easy job, but it's going to take a lot of time to replace all of that. I don't think I'd have to replace all of it per se. Like, for example, this wire, that's fine. It's not touching anything. It's a low voltage application. I'm not concerned about it. I'd forgotten what a pain this set is. I need to replace the wire on the tone control mechanisms, and they are held in with these little friction thingamabobs. And I remember, I believe that also holds the escutcheon on. And I'd really hate to accidentally pull these off and then have that fall forward and break the glass. I don't know what the story on the record player is. I have some hope. The fact that it looks like it's been stored in a dry place, there's a remote chance that the salt crystal cartridge might have some life in it. And the fact that there's a repair date from the 90s means maybe it was still being used. The knobs, they're reproduction. You can tell that's someone actually had a molds. There's a couple sites that still do this, where you can get reproductions made. So the fact that these are solid versus the shitty hollow ones, it's much better. So it's not all bad news, but we're going to be in it probably for the long haul. This is going to take probably most of the day, but that's okay. The lazy Sunday after, well, not even Sunday, it's 8:30 in Sunday morning. That just shows you how little of a life I really... how lame that my life tends to be. Oh well. There's worse things in life, and I'm talking to myself again. So I'm going to pull up the schematic. Hopefully Radio Museum has it, or Nostalgia Air has it. I really want to find out what those values are. Well, unfortunately, there was not really any good schematics for this thing. They're all super blurry and almost impossible to read, both on Radio Museum and Nostalgia Air. But I was able to, by process of elimination, looked up the tube data, and these guys actually measure correctly. Usually these carbon comp guys are not too bad. I guess just, the heat over time just degraded the paint. So I think they're good. The fact that the set worked already, it's further indication that probably they're fine. So now I'm going to dig into this. Start the recap process here, starting with these electrolytics. And then it's just going to be a ton of rewiring work. Some people have indicated correctly that there's another way you can do it, even though I find it's a pain in the butt. Sometimes you can just crumble the stuff off and use plastic sleeving. But I ain't going to do that. That seems like too much of an effort. So instead I'm going to use all this lovely wire I've got here to remanufacture. I'm going to guess at least 50% of this wire is going to have to be replaced, if not more, because we've just got long lengths of it connecting, for example, like the tube filaments. And if you have the filament line coming off of the transformer here, you mess that up, you get a short in that, you'll take out that transformer. So it's absolutely a must. I think I'm going to get the unpleasant part of this task out of the way by, removing the clips that hold the tone control modules. And I'm trying to do this one-handed. I'm going to show you how you do it. You see, they have these little corners that bite into the metal here. You can just lift up on one end. Be gentle. Comes right off. And later what we'll do when we reinstall it, you just kind of like whack it with a hammer to flatten them down, then you push them back on. So be gentle. I believe that the escutcheon is made out of some sort of crappy pot metal, and you do not want to snap those off. All right, I was able to pull all the trim off. I forgot that the escutcheon actually has several layers. It has these little trim pieces that go along the sides. That'll make it easier for eventually cleaning the cabinet. I'll probably take the record player out too, just do the whole thing. Here are the automatic tuning and tone control modules. So now it's time to dive in 2 feet first and start the restoration process. Again, I'm going to start with the capacitors, and then we'll move on to wholesale wire replacement. And yeah, I remember when this got donated, initially I was excited because I liked the way it looked, and then for some reason in the back of my head something was indicating that there was something unpleasant about it, and I couldn't remember what it was. It's the wiring. That's what it is. All right, I'll shut up and quit bitching and get this thing going. All right, so I'm about halfway through the recapping process. Here's my 2 new electrolytics, and you can see I cinched everything way up. Since either side goes to ground, I can use any of the chassis. So I just chose to mount their positives and negatives as close as could possibly be to the sources, if that makes sense. So no more flopping around electrolytics. Paper cap replacement is going pretty easy. There's a lot of room to work in here. Just as a refresher, in case there's any newbies watching, if you're not sure how to replace these, this is how you do it. 99.9% of the time they will have markings on them. So this reads as 0.05 microfarads at 400 volts DC. So you just replace like with like, and you have a fairly wide amount of flexibility. Like, let's say that you have no 0.05 microfarad caps, but you have 0.068s. Totally fine. Won't really make that much of a difference. I always order mine at 630 volts. And what I try to do to make sure I don't lose my place is you want to come in and clip one end at a time, like so. Pull it back and install one end of the new cap on one end. Clip the other side, do the same with the other. That way you don't lose your place. It's just a good habit. When I first started, I would just go in and like clip everything out and lose my place. So don't be like I used to be. Some of these old caps are looking pretty nasty. It looks like some of the ends are burned out, which makes me think we've got some shorted caps. I remember when I did test fire it, the performance wasn't all that amazing, so I think probably just got a bunch of very leaky or partially or mostly shorted capacitors in here. So performance should be greatly increased just for that alone. Oh man, I just dropped the phone in there. Sorry. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 more capacitors. And then it'll be on to the rewiring. This is going to be interesting. We have this sleeved wire, crumbly sleeved wiring. I don't know why they just like took numerous pieces of spring instead of one long piece to run this shit through. Oh well, they probably had a reason. It's probably a manufacturing reason. It's interesting too, I was thinking this thing was made in Cincinnati, and I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe Midwest, were they from Cincinnati? I haven't worked on a lot of Midwest radios, but they too did some of the same thing. They would make radios with big speakers and lots of tubes, but they were made really cheaply. So this is kind of a similar idea here. The radio looks good, has a decent, respectable tube count, and decent sized speaker, but again, cheap construction. But, on the other hand, this radio survived for decades and decades of use, so even though it's cheaply made, That doesn't mean necessarily it's a bad thing either. Alright, so all the casts have been replaced. Again, there's a lot of room in here. It only took me about 45 minutes to do all that. Now it's on to the more fun part, which is replacing a lot of the problematic wire. That includes the switch wire. That probably is going to include this squiggled up wire that I believe is the filament line. I need to replace this guy, which is shielded inside this guy, and probably that's the only one. It's in rubber. The rest of them are in cloth covered wire. That's fine. And then we'll need to overhaul the tone control and the automatic, quote-unquote, automatic push button tuning and its wiring. Also need to replace the wiring going to the pilot lamps. That's coming directly off the 6-volt winding. Do not want those to short out either. And I also need to replace the wiring that's going to the antenna. I don't know, we'll see. Maybe I can put sleeving over those things. Also might see what's going on with the record player. That sound makes me think that the rubber idler wheel is completely turned into rock. It's not useful. Those record players tend to eat records anyway. I'm not sure if it's critical that it works. I'll clean it up to make it look nice, but I'm going to add an audio. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run an audio line through the same record player line, which is this connection, and that way, you know, future owner can listen to their music wherever they want to listen to along with AM radio. There's a switch on the front for phono, so you just switch it over to there and it'll play whatever you run through it. Alright, so I've replaced some of the wiring, the most crucial stuff especially. So I just had a bunch of random lamp cord sitting around. I know it's overkill, but whatever. So now we have brand new switch wire. Did the same thing for the 6-volt filament winding. This cable, of course there's a helicopter going ahead. The problem is that when I pulled the wiring out of this shielding, all of the insulation just stayed inside and I wasn't able to shove new wiring through it. So what I did, because it needs to be shielded obviously, because I believe it's the switch that goes to one of the RF stages, because it's going into that RF transformer, it needs to be shielded. So what I did is I went inside and I got an RCA cable, and it has an outer shielding, and so that goes to chassis in 2 places. That should do a decent amount of shielding. And now I'm going to replace the wire here that goes to the pilot lamps, and I'm going to have to resolder. Oh no, I hope I didn't lose it. Here it is. Here's a switch. Here's the spring. What you do on these guys is when you clip the wire in the back, what happens, if I understand correctly, there's a knot. Let me see if I can show you guys this without having... You see how there's a knot that's tied in the back of that socket? Well, you run a new wire in there and then you tie a knot on the end of it, and that basically loads this spring up. So when you press the new light inside, it'll make contact with this little piece here. I know that probably makes no sense and I'm not speaking English, but when I show you what it looks like, you'll get it. It'll be fine. Alright, so we now have new pilot light wiring, and they're mounted up here. The rest of the wiring in here is either the insulation's intact or it's kind of floating. There's no risk of it touching anything. I am going to add one more little piece of protection that I add to all sets that have a transformer, which is, let's say that something goes haywire with the transformer or anything else in the set. I'm going to put a fuse in between basically the incoming power, which is coming off this switch. This is if you get lamp cord, one side of it will be ribbed, so you can tell which wire is which. So this ribbed wire also goes to one side of the incoming AC. So what I'm going to do is take this lead off. Oh, there's a moth. They've been eating my wife's plants. She's been not pleased about it. So what I'm going to do is install this fuse and fuse holder. I'm going to use one of the existing holes. It'll go about right here. and one end of the AC line will go here and the other side through there. That way the fuse will take the brunt of the abuse and blow before anything catastrophic happens. It's just good, cheap security. I use 1.5 slow blow, and that's critical because when you first turn a tube radio on, you've got a pretty large amount of initial energy usage as the tube filaments come up. So that's critical. Don't use rapid blow fuses. They'll probably just snap right away. So you need to use the right fuse type. Alright, so that guy's installed. I believe this chassis, other than just maybe some contact cleaning, it's just about done. So it's time to move on to the dreaded tone control and automatic tuning modules to redo the rotten wiring, as well as the capacitor replacement. Looks like we've got 4 caps there. I'm assuming each one just affects the tonal quality in some way. At least that's my guesstimation. There was also a lot of caps coming off of, I can't remember which side is the tone control, but there was a shit ton coming off of this plug where one of the modules plugged in. The other one plugs in, of course, over here somewhere. Yeah, that's probably the automatic tuning socket right there. Anyway, what I'll do is to fix these guys, you got to heat these pins up and then pull the wire out. And I'll just do one in, one side at a time. I want to get the length of the wire correct. You want to keep the wires as short as possible to avoid any sort of tone or noise interference. So let's get all that wiring and caps replaced on this one, and we'll move on to the second one. I figured I would try to film this since it is a weird thing trying to redo these guys. So here's what you do. You want to kind of gently tug on the wire that's going into one of the prongs, and just heat that prong with your soldering iron. Be patient, and eventually this should, yeah, see that? Pulled out. So what you want to do then is measure how long the old wire is. Our new cable here, and let's see. It looks like it's about yay long, which is fine. And then you want to strip an equally long bit of your new wire, and then you shove it in, and then you heat the prong that it just came out of. Just being a little bit stubborn, but anyway, eventually it'll seat in place. That's not quite right. I need to definitely add some more solder to that. What I usually find is that these guys, the solder will just kind of get sucked up in the hole. I'm not sure if that's the correct technical term to describe what's happening. And that should be, it's good and solid, and you just hook your new lead to the old lead here. Just do one side at a time. You can see like this stuff just completely disintegrated. So that's how you do it. Just take your time and replace one at a time, and you'll get them all done. Alright, so the tone control module has now been refurbished. We got all new wire, new capacitors. I'll hit that up with a little bit of contact cleaner later. Now it's time to move on to the automatic tuning module. This one won't be as bad, actually. Oh boy. Getting down in there with the soldering iron and not burning that. I cannot burn through any of these teeny little wires. I'm suspicious. This restoration process is actually going a lot easier than stuff usually does for me. I know that some boogeyman is going to pop up. There's going to be some awful thing that I'm going to run into that's going to slow down the project. I'm suspicious. It's going too well. I've only been working on it for about 3 hours, and so far it's been smooth sailing. Usually this kind of crap takes forever, but somehow I'm able to, whatever. Don't jinx it. All right, the second one's done. I don't know, maybe electronic gods are smiling down upon me and giving me a good one this time, but like I said, I usually have a hard time doing this stuff, but this went well. I guess if you do enough of them, you get good at anything. I think the last thing that I need to do as far as rotten rubber wiring goes is maybe check these antenna wires out. That one's kind of problematic because it's right next to that spindle. That could cause all kinds of interference. I think what I'm going to do is, it looks like they go either this way or that way. I could just reattach, attach some new pieces there. I think before I get too much further, we're actually in a pretty good position where we can test a set. See if it now works. I think what I want to do first is clean all the controls. That means all of the knife switches here, the switches here, all the stuff on the radio chassis, and I think I need to tighten up the tuning spring as well. So let's get all that orchestrated together, and then we can give it a test fire here in a few minutes. Well, there is one thing that is easy about this thing. To get to the dial strings, pretty easy. You just take these two little bolts out and the whole front end comes off. That reminds me, it gives me a perfect opportunity. I can maybe clean that up a lot better now that it's out of the chassis. But all I'm going to do is, I see someone's put a knot here. That's fine, whatever. All I'm going to do is like stretch this spring a little bit further over this little nipple thing sticking out here. And I'm not going to be able to film it because it's too tedious, but what I do is I get a pair of needle nose pliers and I'll stretch this out and get like maybe the next rung over that, and that tightens it up a little bit. It was slipping a little bit. It's not bad. So I'll try that and see if that fixes the problem. The other thing, and since it's easier without that big cover, is we're going to oil the bearings. There's bearings in the front here, ball bearings, and in the back there's a bearing surface. And then when the grease solidifies, I can make it harder to turn, so we're going to lubricate that as well. Someone had put a puny little spring in there, and so I took that old one out. So now it seems like it's turning pretty aggressively. That's good. It's going all the way up and down. Actually, it's still having a hard time gripping. I don't know why. That is completely shiny and slick from use. I might have to redo the dial cord on this. I don't know how I feel about the way this is behaving. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this old one off, and I need to just rough and sand this guy up. I mean, this is not a very good design. It's a very cheap and dirty way of doing it. But I think the problem is that it slips here, and it's over the decades just polished this like a mirror, so it's going to slip no matter what I do. It's kind of a pain in the ass, but it ain't going to work right. All right, well, I took it all apart, and I scraped up this thing here with my pocket knife and made a little cross hatch pattern. The other thing I noticed is when I took it off, I think whoever did it last time only wrapped it around this shaft one time. It's supposed to go around 2 or 3 times to get more grip. But now it's gripping hard, real good. Like I go to the end here, and that thing just about wants to flex over. So that's a good and strong, solid connection there. It's not the prettiest spring, but it works. I'm going to take this opportunity, because why the hell not? I'm going to clean the chassis before I put the dial back on, and clean the controls underneath, and then we're going to give it a test fire. I think we're running ahead of time, it seems, usually for these kind of projects. All right, the last thing I did before I decided to maybe start polishing, well, the cabinet, was I added this audio input feature. We have our right and left channels running together for the positive, and the negative goes to chassis. I cleaned all the controls here, all the wafer switches. I cleaned the phono and radio switch. So that should solve our connectivity issues we had earlier. So I'm going to flip this over, give it the wax job, put the chassis back together, and then the fun will begin when it comes to taking this outside and giving the cabinet a once over. It's a little dry and tired, but I think I can rejuvenate it pretty good. All right, so I polished up this guy. You know, I can't think of the last time I've had a original chassis coming in such outstanding condition. I mean, other than a little surface rust on that transformer, this finish is perfect. This is close to how it came from the factory. Again, I think the paint scheme was kind of a little bit of a gimmick. It kind of makes it look like a hot rod. I will say this, at least they put a lot of vent holes in the chassis where the rectifier and output tubes are. That's a good idea, because that's going to dissipate some heat downwards. So it's nice to have a little bit of ventilation for that area so you don't cook your components inside. I put the front back on. I also polished it, so it's looking just a little more shiny and sharp. So I think what I'm going to do now is see about removing the record player and then start working on the cabinet. Okay, it's do or die time. I'm going to have to probably fiddle around with some of these stupid push button controls. Not easy hooking this up, because these have to be, of course, installed back in the case, which is out of commission. So I'm going to test it on this chair here. Okay, good. We've got pilot lights going. Tubes are coming up. He's pretty quiet.
That misbehavior,
Think about some dirty controls or something going on here. Yeah, that control's still dirty. Okay, well, see, I'm glad that I tested it this way. Otherwise, I'd have to get the stupid thing out of the cabinet again. I swore I cleaned the crap out of the... You know what? I take that back. I forgot to clean the wafer switches on there. Crap. All right, so I'll disconnect that and clean those up, and that should improve the performance. And by the way, check out this chassis, man. I don't ever do this because they're never in this good a shape. I'm going to wax that. I'm going to wax this chassis. It's pretty... The paint on it, the original paint on it is just unreal, I got to say. All right, well, I yanked the record player out. It's not exactly a wonderful record player at all. There's cracking going on in the pot metal of the arm. I might put a little glue to stabilize it, but if it works, fine. I don't think it will. I think the cartridge is probably completely hosed. But I'll clean it up. I'll try to oil it up and get it at least mechanically working. And when we do the final assembly, we'll just see if it works or not. And if it doesn't, so be it. Fine. It's not really going to affect the value. And like I said, these things will destroy your records if you happen to be a serious 78 record player kind of person. So now that I've cleared the I've cleared the cabinet, I'm going to take it outside here and give it a dusting. And we'll start with the cleaning up and finish restoration process. Ouch, I just backed into that. All right, some of the process of getting this guy started. First, what I did, and you know you don't have to do this, but I'd do it anyway. I cleaned the interior because it's not been cleaned since it came out of the factory. Might as well get all those dust bunnies out of there. And then I used a product that's been around for a million billion years called Old English. You can get it at your grocery store, hardware store. And then what you want to use, these either a rag or some old paper towels. And you just start working this stuff in. You can see already what a dramatic change that does. It basically does a great job of filling in all of your scratches and abrasions. The first application I put on, I do it real heavy and thick because I want it just to soak in, especially when you have an original finish like this that hasn't been fooled with. You can see like this area here where we've got some abrasions. Ta-da! Like, just makes the shit disappear. I don't know what it's made out of, but it sure works. And I'm not sure which company makes it, but if they're watching, they should sponsor my channel. But anyway, that's what you do. You see how much better that looks before we started. So we're going to go over the whole thing with a generous amount of Old English and let that set for a little while. Then we'll go back to the record player, clean that up while the first coat soaks in. Well, I can tell the record player ain't going to happen. All the teeth are broken off of this thing. It's some sort of crappy pot metal and it's expanded. So basically the record player is out of commission. And again, it's not going to hurt my feelings, but I do want to clean it up. I started that process just a minute ago. Doesn't matter that I just bashed the needle because it ain't going to work anyway. In the meantime, I gotta tell you, man, I'm like really excited. Usually you can really tell how good or bad a finish is after you put the first application of Old English on it. I can tell you, this is gonna shine up like a new copper penny. I remember the president was eyeing this thing up yesterday. He's like, what do we want to do with it? Do we want to, is it supposed to be something we're going to keep? We're going to sell it? And I don't think we have any large dial Crosleys. So we may very well keep it. I don't know. We've been making a lot of keep it decisions lately to somewhat of our own detriment because we're, once again, filling up the building. But I don't know. In my opinion, you can never have too many radios. All right, so I got the record player cleaned up. Again, it's kind of a shame it's not really going to be used, but I think as a static display, it's presentable. So now it is time to go over the cabinet with Carnauba car wax. I'm going to let it maybe sit for a few more minutes, then I'm going to proceed with the waxing. Alright, next stage is to use my electric buffer, orbital buffer, to wax the console. Family with kids is coming by. I don't want to look like I'm talking to myself, but anyway, that's what's going to happen. Carnauba car wax, buffer, do it a couple times, then we'll see what it looks like. Alright, well it is looking pretty darn good. This is after two pretty heavy applications of wax. And it's hard to actually video this, but the shine on it is just perfect. People liked things glossy back then. There's a lot of people when they restore radios like this to put a satin finish on it. And most of the time, that's not right. Shiny was definitely in the 30s and 40s. And so this is about what it would look like. I can see, it's interesting, just like Midwest, it seems like some models Crosley would just really dress them up, even though it's kind of a cheap radio. This is certainly one of those examples. I also cleaned up and polished the escutcheon parts and the knobs. So, with that, I might put one more application on it, and then I believe it'll be time to start doing some reassembly. anyway, it's working pretty good now. That's with the phono selection selected. We go to radio, it's rather sensitive.
For example, most.
But I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. This is probably about as close to being a factory original 1941 Crosley as you can get. Again, I really prefer the finish to be original if I can help it. Is it perfect? No. It's pretty darn good. And I feel like as soon as you strip an old finish off, you essentially... It doesn't seem like as much of an old radio to me. That's just my opinion, though. But it turned out good. This project, I believe, is a success. And I don't know, I had an enormous amount of satisfaction doing this one. I think when you start with something that you're not really sure how it's going to turn out in the end, and then it turns out nearly perfect, well, that's great. You can't ask for a better ending. Anyway, I really enjoyed working on this, and I hope that you guys stuck around long enough to see all my bumbling and fiddling. But in the meantime, if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them down in the comments section below. And until the next time something like this or some other electronic thingamabob comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.